Trang, are you good to go? All
Always.
right. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Loop and Learn T1D speaker series. What an exciting event for us. We were talking about how thrilled we are to be sharing this with you all. Dr. Trang Lai is the Chief Medical Officer for Insulet Corporation, makers of Omnipod, which you know already. And if you were in a cave somewhere, you might have missed the announcement that Omnipod 5 was approved and released on Friday, or approved by the US FDA on Friday. And 4 days later, we get to talk to Dr. Lai and hear all about the system and ask a bunch of questions, because we do come from the DIY looping community. As always, we do our little disclaimer. I shortened it today because we're not talking about our DIY loop, but remember that the open source loop app is a do-it-yourself closed loop algorithm, and you take full responsibility for building and running the system, and do so at your own risk. And remember, the DIY loop app is not FDA approved for therapy. A little advertising. Loop and Learn has a website called loopandlearn.org. Lots of information, lots of updates, lots of how-tos. Bookmark that. That's a good place to always go look at. We have an amazing newsletter that Carol puts out just about every week. You want to sign up for it. If you don't want to read it, you don't have to, but at least you'll get it in your inbox. Upcoming events, we're beginning to line up our speakers, but really, really good ones. So we're starting out with today. Next week, we have Chris Wilson. You do not want to miss this. This is all about ISF and your current blood glucose. He is known as the glucose genius, and an amazing speaker. He's also a T1D. He's one of us. So don't miss it. It's Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Then on the 27th of February, we rescheduled Dr. Laura Nally. She's a T1D pediatric endocrinologist. She's a looper, and she'll be talking about T1D, looping, and exercise. Again, I do not miss. This is a return visit for her. And she'll also be doing an open mic with us, probably sometime in March. And then in March, we start off with Eric Verhoff from Seagrove Partners, hearing about what's coming up in CGMs and interesting new technologies. Helping me today is Carol Vashon, Loop and Learn's admin, and I call her a loop wizard. She's the spouse of a T1D. Tina Hammer, mom of 11-year-old Reese, T1D, who did a video for us on how to start looping. And some of our admins are on the phone as well. Marion Barker, Mark Oldham, Glenn Weber, Priscilla Fobo, I don't know who else is on, Brittany, Rebecca, I'm looking. So why are we here? We are here to listen to Dr. Trang Lai, who is a leading expert in artificial pancreas and diabetes technologies, and has been the lead for the Omnipod 5 Automated Insulin Delivery System, which was approved by the US FDA just last week. She's originally from Australia, and I do have a message for you, Trang, from one of our members in Brisbane. Thank you so much for getting Omnipod approved in Australia. She started immediately. She's thrilled to pieces and wanted me to personally thank you. Anyway, so she is formerly clinical assistant professor of pediatric and endocrinology at Stanford University School of Medicine prior to joining Insulet. I think it's now 5 years ago. Both Trang Lai and Chasey Petrovic, who is the CEO of Insulet, have been extremely supportive of our DIY looping community, acknowledging our efforts and the passion to push forward the technology that we need to manage our own diabetes. It's been pretty remarkable support from the commercial side. We ran a poll of our Facebook group members about a year ago, and about 75% of our DIY loopers were using Omnipod, and that was a year ago. I think it's probably closer to 85%. So we have a vested interest in Insulet and their future plans. We use Omnipod. We love Omnipod. So thank you so much. And I'm going to close this out, stop sharing, and I will turn this over to Dr. Lai. Please, if you have your mic on, please shut that off, and also turn off your cameras so that we can all focus on Dr. Lai. And
actually, I really like seeing everyone. So
You want them back on?
Yeah, I only do this so I can see people.
Okay,
So
well, there you go. Is that better?
yeah, that's much better.
Righty. But make sure your mics are off. So thank you. Thank you for being here. We are really interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so this was all very last minute, Joanne. Thank you so much for having me. As you said, actually my official title is Senior Vice President and Medical Director at Insulet. And I've been here for, as you said, the last 5 years, and I lead the clinical function. And I'm super, super excited to be announcing that we just got clearance for Omnipod 5. And this, as you know, is our automated insulin delivery system, and it is the first automated tubeless system available with smartphone control. So, I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. I'll just start off by describing what we got cleared, and then I'm happy to take questions throughout this session. It is a real joy for me to be here, and it is really the only forum that we have planned for me to really interact with our podders. So I just really love seeing everyone's faces, and I'm ready for all the hard questions. So Joanne, you can feel free to start opening up shortly. So, it's been quite a long time since we initially submitted Omnipod 5. And for those of you who've been following us, our clinical trial started with the system back in December of 2019. And, that was the study in our 6 to 70-year-old age group. That went really well. And actually later in 2020, we did the 2 to 6-year-old age group as well. And that study's been done, and that data's been presented. And our main publication is in Diabetes Care. And so we submitted to FDA around December of 2020. And so it was just over a year since FDA reviewed it and cleared it. And what got cleared was the pump, and the Insulet provided controller. But what was unique is that it has smartphone control as well. So you can use it with the Insulet provided controller, but it also has the additional functionality of the Android compatibility as well on selected Android phones. And, we are releasing more and more phones as we speak. So that's all coming, but initially with Android. So that is something that is not like you don't have to have the smartphone control to use the system. You can use it just with the Insulet provided controller. So right now we're in limited market release, and it's always important to, before you do any big launch, to make sure that you start small and make sure that everything goes well. And so we're with our product that just got cleared. It's really not just innovating with the product, but also innovating in how we serve our customers in the way our users and customers will be accessing the onboarding portal and the training portals. So all of that is going live, and then customer support, product support, all of that. How do we do warm transfer to Dexcom? All of that is new for us. And so we've got to really start small, make sure all of those are ironed out. And then once we're happy with kind of that critical mass of readiness for big launch, we'll be announcing that, and we expect that to be shortly after the limited market release is completed. So what I've been saying to people is the best way to get on to Omnipod 5, if that's what you're after, is which I know many people are, is to get on Omnipod DASH today, because we expect that if you have coverage through Omnipod DASH, that will there's a very, very high likelihood that you will be covered for Omnipod 5 in the next few months as we ramp up market access or payer coverage for our users. So Omnipod 5 will only be accessed through the pharmacy channel, And, we've done that for a number of reasons, mainly to reduce friction for our patients in terms of the ability to get access as quickly as possible, and to reduce out-of-pocket costs for users. So traditionally, people have had to kind of, get through DME channel, the durable medical equipment. That means very high out-of-pocket costs for our patients. And then, what we're trying to do here is really reduce that out-of-pocket costs for our users through the pharmacy channel. The majority of our DASH users today pay no more than $50 a day a month to get 30-day supplies. So it's, and it's certainly, compared to DME channel, it is more affordable for many of our users. And what else? So I think, that is really key, is that DASH, and then that being able to transition over to Omnipod 5. I think that's probably a primary question that we get. And then, how to get on Omnipod 5 if you're already a DASH user or an Omnipod user there is an interest list that we are keeping. If you go to Pod Essential, you can sign up for the interest list. And what that means is that when we do go through the benefits check, when we go into full launch, it does mean that those people will have priority. So I think that will be important for people to hear. I've said a lot, so I might pause, and Joanne, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, I'm going to jump in with the first. Where does the software reside?
So you mean the software for the algorithm?
Yes.
Yeah, so that resides on the actual pod itself. And that's really super exciting for us because, when we thought about Omnipod 5, we did actually for a minute think, well, maybe we should put it on the controller. Because people, they do carry their phones all the time, and maybe that's the way of the future. And that would mean, potentially less engineering, a different way to design a product. But, in what we heard back from users and what we really learned was that it was really critical that the algorithm was actually on the pod itself. And that's really important because, people, especially little kids, aren't always going to be hanging around a phone. And so it was important that we really stay true to the whole Omnipod experience of really relying on the pod itself. So the algorithm is on the pod, and it communicates wirelessly with the Dexcom G6 CGM. And all of the closed loop happens without needing to be close to the controller or any phone, in fact. And so the general use is that you would access your controller or your smartphone device just to see your CGM values and to stop a pod and deliver boluses through the day, which, as a hybrid closed loop system, you're still expected to do. But in between times, you don't need to be tethered to that device in order to have that on-body closed loop control.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you two follow-ons, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carol and Tina to start juggling the questions. If the software resides on the pod, does that make it easier for Insulet to make changes to the algorithm and update or enhance it in any way?
Yeah, it depends on the actual change to the algorithm, but it is something that really kind of sits pretty separately to the pod. And, our pods get programmed all the time. And so, mechanically, it's essentially the same as DASH. It's not quite the same. It's not like exactly the same, but essentially it's the same. And it's really the algorithm component that is sort of, put in nice and neatly inside the Omnipod 5 pods. And so we have designed it with all of that in mind in terms of future, tweaks. If we were, for instance, I saw a question about, other targets. If we were to add that functionality, some of that actually resides in the controller and some of it resides in the pod. But these are not kind of wholesale changes necessarily to the algorithm.
And one more question. Do you see this beginning to work with, or displays work with, smart watches?
Yeah, absolutely. And today we have a little bit of that functionality in terms of the Omnipod display and view apps can already work with smartwatches, but it will be something that we anticipate will be available in future.
Okay. Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're muted.
Hi, Dr. Lai. So questions about what's the life of an average Omnipod looper? Just going through the day. What happens in the morning? How does a day work? Are they going to be bolusing for meals? How's all that work? What happens to people today? We all know what happens now when we do what we do, but what happens on your system?
Yeah, well, I can start. And actually, I have a special guest on the line who did tell me that she just joined.
Special guest.
So her name's Lisa, and after I explain kind of a typical day, then perhaps Lisa can share some of her experiences because her son was in the trial. But what I'll share is that in terms of the user experience, with Omnipod 5, the setup is very similar to Omnipod DASH. So you enter in your basal settings, your bolus calculator settings, and then what's really the key difference is the target glucose that you can set up a profile. So you might want to be 120 during the day, 110 at night, or vice versa. Or you might be new to AID therapy and you want to run at a higher set point of 140, for instance. Say you get symptomatic at 100 and you might want to run at a higher set point. So that enables you to set that up. And then otherwise the setup is very similar to Dash. And then all you need to do is then add the transmitter ID, and that tells the pod which CGM to look for. And that's how that system is set up. And once you have a CGM transmitter ID entered, then you can turn automated mode on, and that starts the algorithm working to modulate insulin delivery every 5 minutes. And so a typical day would mean that hopefully you wake up in the morning and you have a nice blood glucose level of around 110, 120. You have a really flat night because that's where, that's what our data shows, is that people really have beautiful flat nights and they wake up in range. And then we expect people to bolus for meals. And so you'd enter in the carbs and you pre-meal bolus just like you do today. And then the algorithm takes care of the rest. So, just like with Loop, how when you're predicted to fall, our prediction is 60 minutes. If you're predicted to fall per our algorithm, then the algorithm will suspend or reduce insulin delivery accordingly. And if you're running high, well above your set point, and your IOB is low, then the algorithm's going to deliver a fair amount of insulin to try and get you back in range within a couple of hours. So it's something that we tested with a lot of unannounced meals or meals without boluses, so that we understand what it's like to live with diabetes. We have learned a lot from the diabetes community. As Joanne mentioned, I am an endocrinologist, so I've looked after a lot of teenagers and children. And so, I know how hard it is for people to do all of that every single day and count carbs. And and have to think about diabetes every day. And the whole point of all of this is really to reduce that mental burden and really allow people to relax a little bit regarding their care and try and really allow them to be in range more of the time. And, all of our data supports that we have much higher time in range. And what I'm really proud of is, our hypoglycemia profile being pretty low, and in fact, lowest of, all the published data on the pivotal trials. So that makes me, really confident in the way our algorithm can respond to that hyperglycemia without causing hypoglycemia. So that's where, I think our system will work really well. But Lisa, perhaps now would be a good time for you to share, your experience in the trial.
Hi, Trang. Nice to see you. My son is 10 years old, and he's sitting here listening to this too. And he's been in the Omnipod Horizon or Omnipod 5 trial for just over 2 years. And he asked if he could share a couple comments really quickly before I jump in. So do you want to come on so they can see you?
It's been great. It's been much easier to manage with this compared to what it was before. It's definitely a great innovation, and I hope this will be available to the public soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Wow.
So I think, I come from a healthcare background, and he was diagnosed when he was about 3.5. And I would say that he's kind of I realize no two people with type 1 are the same, but he's really kind of an outlier. He was on diluted Humalog until he was almost 7 years of age. And diabetes has been kind of a roller coaster for us. He's been on Omnipod since he was diagnosed in 2015. And we really struggled, and he's not on diluted insulin, but for example, for almost every meal, regardless of what it is, it requires a split bolus. And so on the old Omnipod system, we used to do extended boluses for almost every meal. And I was investing a lot of time and mental energy in managing diabetes and figuring out percentages and figuring out ratios and figuring out, okay, for this type of meal, how much should I give up front? For this type of meal, how much should I give? And I was often wrong. And so we were struggling. And I pulled up our tide pool data from the month before we started the study, and he was hovering about 60% of the time in range. We had a lot of lows. His average blood sugar was probably in the high 160s, 170s, and I was working hard for that. I pulled up his data today for the last month, and his A1C is tracking a 6.7. His average blood sugar is in the low 140s. He's low less than 1% of the time, and I barely think about diabetes. It's been completely life-changing and life-altering for us. I will also say we tried DIY loop. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so there are lots of smart loopers here, and we got lots of help. And had we stuck with it, we probably would have had good success, but it was so cumbersome. This has been a life changer for us. I sleep through the night a lot of nights because we do a lot of split boluses, which you would all think of as extended boluses. There are times where I get it wrong, and I say, okay, maybe he needs 40% upfront for this, or 60%, and his blood sugar climbs, and I miss the climb, and it's not instantaneous because it thinks it has the system thinks that there's some insulin on board. But if I fall asleep and I don't remember to give the last percentage of that, it's going to bring him down, and it's going to bring him down really gradually and nicely. It is honestly, I'm so grateful to Trang and Insulet and the Stanford people who I hounded incessantly when I heard about the trial and begged for a spot. It has been, and the trial's gone on longer than expected, so we're still on the trial system, and I can't say enough good things about it. So I'm also happy to answer questions from the perspective of a user, but thank you so much, Trang.
Just a quick
And
question.
my son also said he'll answer questions if anybody has any.
What is your son's name?
His name is Hudson.
Okay. Hey, Hudson, thanks for joining us.
Joanne says thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You seem like one happy mama. That's awesome.
It has been a complete life-changing event for us.
Yeah. So we are also interested in what's the expected time and range. This is for Trang and for the average user. And then can users achieve a time and range of 90% or above? And if so, how does that work?
Yeah, well, it's definitely possible. In fact, we had a couple of patients actually in that range, and it was really quite remarkable because they came from MDI, actually. So really just quite extraordinary and very impressive. But it's not the norm, right? If I look at the whole entire data set, we were able to achieve 74% time in range in our 14 and over age group. And it actually, one of the things that I don't think I've been clear about, but it does have targets going from 110 to 150 in 10 milligram per deciliter increments. And in that 14 and plus age group, the most widely utilized target was the 110 target. And if you look at the data for just at that target, we got 76% time in range. So that, is really good if you look at all the closed loop systems out there. And so overall, actually a third of our patients were able to get a time in range greater than 80%. Which, I'm really pleased about. And I think that's really good for a commercial system. And in our, so overall 74, and then in our kids, we got 68%. And that was from, from a baseline of around 55% there. So, when you're looking at these different systems, it's important to look at, where people came from, what their starting A1C was, and then where they finally got to. But, one of the things that I am really proud of is the durability of these results. So yes, initially it was just a 3-month pivotal trial that kind of went on and on and on because of the pandemic and the delays with FDA review. And so, we're now nearly 2 years out. And the last data cut we did was 12 months, and it really showed durability in being able to sustain those results. So I'm really, really proud of that, because some of the questions we get, okay, yeah, that's really great, but, do people stop bolusing and then get really high glucose levels and, throw it, everything goes out the window? And what we've shown is that doesn't happen. And I think it's, people adapt to the system and realize that, look, if they bolus and they're able to put in, less work than they used to, then, at least the system will get them into range in the morning. Their day starts off really well. They have to continue to bolus for meals, but then, it does a good job of sort of getting them back into range if they happen to be out. So it really helps, provide that kind of safety net for our users.
Can I add one thing? Because I don't want to be misleading about what I said. I said that his blood sugar average is 144. And because of the variability in his blood sugar, I went back and looked at his targets, and we could have targets set lower and probably be running him lower. But our targets vary throughout the day from as low as 120 to as high as 150 overnight, because he's an active kid. And so I think we would probably be achieving a lower overall, average blood sugar if our targets weren't set the way they are. So I think there's flexibility to achieve something lower, but I think for us, it would come at the cost of, reduced sleep and probably a higher percentage of low blood sugars, just given the variability in his day.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I think that's a really great point, actually, because, even although in our adults, the highest percentage was 110 at 80% time. Actually, in our pediatric group and our 2 to 6 year olds, there was a much higher percentage use of those higher targets. And so, this system really enables people to augment their glucose control depending on their comfort levels for hyperglycemia. And we know that, it just does not take much in that really young population to kind of tip things tip the scales. And so, people might not want to run at that lowest set point all the time. And so, really proud of the team to be able to deliver customizable targets for our users. And I think it's really in that pediatric population that you see that the different patterns of use.
For the adults that were able to achieve 90%, what did that take? Were they low carb? Were they?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's all of those things that many people are in this group are able to do, and are very disciplined about. I do think it's achievable, but you're right. It's all those other things of diet and, really pre-meal bolusing and really understanding how your body, responds to that insulin. And I think it does take that level of being, attuned to those signals to really get that level of glucose control. But as I mentioned, this particular woman that I'm thinking of, where we did a case study on her, really had, she was like 93% time in range, but certainly not the normal. And I'm not promising that everyone's going to get that. So.
Yeah. Is there any plan for the target range to be modified lower, especially for people that have been in this for a long time? And if so, is that a downrange thing?
Yeah, it's
can it be modified now, even by the user, say?
No, so the lowest target is 110 for our system. And, if you look across at the other systems, it is, the lowest of what's FDA cleared right now. And it is what has given us the profile of safety and the efficacy that we've seen. Certainly, it is something that we talk about all the time and would potentially look at as a candidate, as one of the knobs that we could potentially tweak in future. But right now, that is the system that we will be bringing to market. And, I think when we think about bringing products to market, what I personally have to think about is, is this going to meet the needs of the broad population of users? And so we are always thinking about, okay, how do we make all of these devices more simple, more easily accessible by kind of the general population, so that it really can be some, technology that can be used by the masses, by, people of all socioeconomic class, and really reducing that friction and being able to deliver a product that is very simple and easy to use, and takes minimal training. That is where we're also very focused on. So we're really pleased to, deliver a product that's simple and easy to use and has an algorithm that is very safe and effective. And I think, it's, as a researcher, I'd say, yes, your algorithm might work really well in adults, but, in the real world, children have to use it. And little children with little bodies who don't weigh much more than 20 pounds have to use these systems. And so that's where I'm sort of coming from, is that little baby. Like last week, our team put a little baby, under 6 months on our product. And so that's kind of the thoughts that are going through my head about, how do we bring safe products to market that can treat, this little child under 6 months, but also, older adults who've had diabetes for a long time safely. We did that work. We did all of our research in little children well before the pivotal study, and then it's taken time to bring this product to market, and we're super excited about it.
I think we could rally a strong voice for a second level, and even require people to somehow pay or take a test or somehow show our ability and our
show the
knowledge,
data, yeah,
so that I understand you have to go for the masses, and if I were running the business, I would do the same thing. But we are a select group. We are a tiny group, and we know that. but we're allowed voice.
We have thought about, is there some kind of paywall, to like kind of that second level. So yeah, those are definitely things that, our engineering teams, commercial teams think about, how to make sure that our products really meet the needs of all of our users, including, all of our loopers.
We would love to join any effort and give some feedback and go meet with the FDA if that's what it took to hear that other part of the population, because while we're small, we deserve that voice and we understand what you're doing, but we would love to participate with your engineering team at any point. If that
it would be interesting if you could do data collection, maybe planning to do this, but data collection to see what parts of the population hover in what ranges, to see if, how readily doable that is even. Yeah,
we do plan to do that as soon as, we hit the market. We'll be doing more post-market research to look at how, the system is utilized. And, Omnipod 5 wouldn't have come to market without the support of this group and the DIY community. Honestly, it is really your voice and all the efforts that have really pushed and propelled this innovation. And so we have, much gratitude for the DIY community to really make and really help advocate for better innovation for all of our patients.
Now, how will Omnipod 5 handle dawn phenomenon or foot on the floor, things like that? I'm thinking unannounced meal, but and I have an 11-year-old and we see a little bit of that sometimes more than others, but I haven't personally seen the really sharp rise that I know a lot of people do. So I know it can be a lot worse than what I've seen.
Yeah, so we handle that in a similar way to an unannounced meal, in that, the algorithm doesn't really know whether you've eaten food or not. There's nothing that special in it to figure it out. It just knows that your glucose is rising and it delivers insulin, and it needs to do it safely in that case when there are no carbs on board and only cortisol driving that dawn phenomenon. So it will respond appropriately to that. And, it has worked relatively well in our studies.
Have any of your users, I'm assuming not, but in your trials used a Frezza when they were starting to run high to bring things down quickly, or faster insulins?
Yeah, so in our study, you were not allowed to use that. So it was specifically that you just had to use the insulin that was in the pump. And we it was going to take longer for us, honestly, if we were to add the shorter acting insulins. And so the trial would have been much larger. And so that's why it's approved for Humalog, Novolog, and Admelog.
So how about hyperglycemia due to absorption or cannula issues? Say somebody's blood sugar is 300 and one of our members, Maddie, said she can't tell if it's her sugar having a bad day or if it's, pump related or what is it? How do you handle that? Or how does the system handle that, I would say?
Yeah, as you know, there could be a number of reasons why you're 300. It could be because of carbs, misestimated carbs, or, underestimating carbs, I should say, rather than misestimation. But, basically that could just be the reason. But I would say, with our system, if the algorithm detects that your glucose is rising, it's going to be delivering insulin well ahead of you hitting that 300 if there is no insulin on board. And so it already, you know, by the time you're 300, it's already kicked in. And so it, you know, if you have a true occlusion though, or your pod is out of your body, which sometimes happens, there is really no way for the system to know that, aside from the alerts on your CGM. So it's really important that you do keep your CGM close by and listen for that. But yes, so, you know, what I'd say is that by the time you're 300, the algorithm's already kicking in to deliver, you know, a lot of insulin. And then, you know, what happens in general cases when perhaps there's an underestimation of carbs, then, you know, generally within that 2 to 3 hour time frame, the algorithm would have given you enough insulin to get you back into range.
So question for you, does that happen as a normal course of business? So every morning at 5 a.m., your blood glucose goes up to 200. And so your pod knows to automatically, you know, crank down the insulin, you know, and bring it down? Or is this something that it's more reactive?
So it's not time-based. It is based upon the glucose prediction and the insulin on board at the time. So it wouldn't say it's 5 o'clock and, you know, make a change there. No. What I will say is that if you're running 200 or a mean glucose of 200 when your target is set at 110, and for whatever reason, and, you know, you're tending to be running high, what will happen over time is that the system will adapt to that. Because you're running high, the system's always going to be trying to get you down to target. And so it's going to be delivering a lot of insulin over time. And so what it does is it adapts to that hyperglycemia and will give you more insulin if you're still running at 200 in say a week's time. And so that's another unique feature of our system, is that it adapts based on the total daily insulin that is delivered through the system.
Does it average previous days?
Yeah, it's a more complicated mathematical formula, but what it does is that there is more weighting on the more recent days. But it's something that, you know, we don't adapt super fast and not super long. We think it's, you know, just right, adaptivity. And, you know, the example that I've given the last few days is that in the, you know, there was a patient who, you know, had higher A1C, came in the study, had a basal insulin of 27 units, and the system adapted that basal insulin delivery over time to 70 units in a couple of weeks. So, you know, because of that persistent hyperglycemia. So the algorithm did that all on its own. Patient didn't have to tweak anything, doctor didn't have to tweak anything. So it does have that capability to respond to persistent hyperglycemia.
Can we talk to it? I know it's not a robot, but can we tell it it's Thanksgiving today and I'm going to eat chocolate out of the box and have stuffing, but it's just today?
All day.
Yeah, so no, you can't talk to it like that. But what you can do is you could bolus more on those days. And that's how, and say, you know, you celebrate Thanksgiving over a particularly long period of time, maybe, then what the system would do would say, Joanne, you're doubling your insulin requirements every day. We've noticed that for the last few pods. Maybe you just need more background insulin, and it will crank it up. So if it's not going to know that it's Thanksgiving for you, but you can tell it through bolusing and correcting for hyperglycemia on those days.
So you just mentioned it, quote unquote, talking to her, but we know it doesn't do that. But We as loopers are really used to knowing things like, the ISF and knowing and setting and messing and tweaking ISFs and carb ratios and, all the things. Will users have access to those things on Omnipod 5?
Yes, so the bolus calculator works exactly the same as in DASH. And so you can control your insulin to carb ratio. And if you're more resistant in the morning and you have a tighter number or a lower number, then you can set that. You can set your correction factor. And so the bolus calculator works exactly the same. Although we did make one quite significant change, and that is you are able to import both the CGM value and the trend into the bolus calculator so that the system can give more or less depending on, whether you're rising or crashing, and no other bolus calculator does that. So that's something that's unique for our setting, for our system. But yes, you can control all those things that you're used to controlling today. I think the key difference is that for that very first pod, you do need to let the system know your basal settings. So you need to provide a 24-hour profile for that. But what the system does is it takes that information and it starts with that first pod. It uses that information to learn. And over time, by the time, your next pod is on, it will have adapted to both your basal rates and also the total daily insulin that the system has delivered in a 24-hour period to determine what your kind of baseline levels need to be. And then over time, it will make those adjustments with every pod.
So when Joanne has Thanksgiving, will she the next day be able to, could she possibly say, disregard yesterday? Is that a possibility?
No, there's no way to disregard, but this is why we sort of average things out a little bit, because we know that's life with diabetes is, one day you're 70 units a day and next day you're 110 units a day. That fluctuation is pretty normal if we look at clinical, if you look at the data from, our thousands and thousands of users, that level of kind of intraday variability is pretty high. And so we've got to be able to kind of respond to that and kind of not be too rigid. Oh, but they only had 70 yesterday, we can't give 110 today. Well, we've got to make sure that it adapts to our users and can meet all of those things.
Are we able to set temp rates or overrides for when you're sick or you have a shot of cortisone and what you're going to need to do? Is it purely by bolusing or can we have an override over the system?
So it's purely by bolusing, but you can also stop automated mode at any time and just run your pump in manual mode, which is our Omnipod DASH system essentially. So you can, if you feel like you want to run 2 units an hour, because you're on a high dose of cortisol, which makes it really challenging for any system to get you in range, that's perfectly fine. And you're able to do that with your temp basal setting. But we don't have anything aside from, delivering the boluses, as you mentioned.
And we had an interesting talk with the folks from Diaboloop, and they mentioned issues of slow digestion, slower absorbing foods, and they're working on an algorithm that will take that into account. Is there any way to do extended bolus or for slower food, or you're slower than the average, or will it just learn that's what you do?
Yeah, so extended bolus is only available when you're in manual mode, and it's not available when you have automated mode on. And there are a few reasons for that. We actually did a study where we gave people high-fat meals and the same meal on 2 days. And on one day, we gave them, Omnipod 5 with an extended bolus. And on another day, we gave just let the algorithm run. And what we found was, in fact, there was no additional benefit from running an extended bolus over the algorithm. And so it was because of that reason that we really wanted to kind of simplify the approach and just really, let the algorithm run. Sure, if you want to, give a couple of units up front and kind of let the algorithm go, then, then that's still fine for you to bolus at any time during that meal. But really just kind of letting the algorithm do its thing has worked really well for our users.
I have a technical question. You'll probably guess where it came from, but is the algorithm that was licensed 6 years ago from UCSB via Mode AGC the same as your algorithm for the Omnipod 5?
It's the basis of the algorithm, but we've made a lot of changes since Insulet licensed that algorithm. A lot of changes. And I think where the magic really is necessary is figuring out what the safety constraints are. How does it adapt over time? And I think the safety constraints are the key thing, because honestly, any of these systems, you make a prediction, you give insulin, it works, right? Like the crux of it is all very similar across these systems, but you've kind of got to be brave enough to give like a decent amount of insulin and kind of not just hope for the best, but that's kind of what we do in our early studies is we think this is enough, and in our first studies, we're like, we looked at the results and we were like, it's not enough. We need to give more because we can't just shut down because someone gave 2 units as their meal bolus when they really needed 10, and then not kick in for another 3 hours, so that's sort of where the magic is really figuring out like kind of how much to give, how aggressively, when do you stop to not cause a huge crashing low 2 hours later, and then we're all in big trouble, So yeah, it's very different, but I'm really proud of, where we've landed. And it was our patients that taught us how to coast it in beautifully. And it was, the clinical data from all of our participants that made Omnipod 5 what it is today.
I think we're all trying to wrap our heads around the magic. And it comes back to parents have their kids in school Monday through Friday, and then the weekend is a different animal. How does it know that if it doesn't watch the calendar or the time? How does it do that 5 and 2?
Yeah, so it doesn't really, it doesn't know about time. It just, I think because when, we're not rigid beings and children run around, and I have a 4-year-old at home and whatever I cook, he doesn't eat. So, we just know that children and humans we kind of just do whatever we want. And it's really hard with diabetes because it's really hard to not live a regimented life if you kind of want good glucose control. But it's incredibly burdensome. And so the system's going to react and adapt to, what your most kind of normal pattern, what your most frequent pattern is. It's going to work, most well for that.
Can we just talk about CGM for a moment?
Yeah.
You work with the G6.
Yes.
Do you work with Abbott?
Yeah, we do, but that's still in development.
Okay.
But we are working on it, and I'm super excited about that product as well. And when we've announced it, we can talk more about it. But it's one of the really great things about what the FDA has done in terms of pushing innovation and interoperability is carving pathways for us to be interoperable with, future generations of CGM that meet the iCGM criteria, as well as, the other products out there that are iCGM approved.
What about Eversense? Are you talking with them as well?
Yeah, we have had discussions with them, and we haven't announced anything.
Got it. And so let's talk about G7 for a moment. Whenever the FDA moves in that direction, whenever that is, are you prepared to jump automatically?
Yeah, I can tell you that we are working on G7. We haven't made any announcements about when that product will be available.
Okay.
So if a user goes swimming, does it still work when a user is swimming, and do we get data while that's happening, or during other exercise where you wouldn't have a phone right on you?
Yeah, so it does. So the pod and CGM, both waterproof devices, we did a study, and Lisa's son was actually part of the study at Stanford. Stanford's doing it, actually looking at this in closer detail, and more data will be coming out this year. So people throughout our study did swim with both devices. We had a fair few competition swimmers, and it worked reasonably well because the system is able to deliver based on prediction when there isn't a CGM value coming in. So, as you know, because this is a group that knows CGM well, how your system is going to work, as well as your CGM, as long as your CGM and algorithm are communicating. So it's important that all the devices are talking to one another. So in our labeling, we say that, devices should be within line of sight. And, what we really worked on and improved upon, especially, through our clinical study, was improving that Bluetooth antenna so that the devices would be talking a lot more, would have essentially a stronger signal to communicate when they're worn on different parts of the body. And so in terms of swimming, Bluetooth just does not work well through water. But, people who swim are often occasionally out of the water, and then, they get a few points and, a few data points come through, and then they're back in again. And so the algorithm is still delivering based on that prediction. And, as people come in and out, then, they're still in automated mode. And so they're still able to get insulin if they're in range or they're running high. And, if they're low, then they may be suspended. So it's still kind of working in the background. And yes, if you're completely submerged for a long time, then, you're likely not going to get connectivity there because of the water being a blocker there.
And the prediction time is in an hour?
That's right.
And that's a lot different than what we're used to. Will you please talk about that?
Yeah, I think all the systems have different prediction horizons and different types of calculations. And what goes into the calculation is the CGM history. And so, you're looking at the last X amount of time, and then you predict how much it's going to change, and then also the insulin that's on board as well. So, how you calculate that insulin model and when you're predicting that to disappear, all goes into that prediction. And so, getting that just right for big people, little people is really important. And that's basically, our sort of secret sauce and how we figured that out. And we think it works really well for our users.
For all of us who do the DIY, we know devices fail. And we live with that, and we have to figure that out. And it's probably part of the bane of our existence. So you have a CGM, so you have a Dexcom, and you have an Omnipod, and data doesn't flow who points at who fixes it? Where do you go for support? Will the system then understand something is failing and there's an occlusion, or you're not getting your data, or whatever?
Yeah, well, those are all really great questions. And, I think we would just work through them just like you would expect. We'd say, okay, so is your CGM working? Can you see the data on your Dexcom? If you can see it there, it means your CGM is working. Now, let's look at the Omnipod 5 app. Is the data actually coming through? Do you have the right transmitter number in? Values coming through? Where are the devices located? Are they within line of sight? And then, figure it out from there. So as you know, there could be multiple kind of failure points in that setup. So it could be really anything. And so we would talk the user through all of those things and, make sure that all of our users are well taken care of.
But what kind of safety features are built in? So today, depending upon what version you're using, we might have features that would say, if your last CGM value was more than 20% different from your previous CGM value, we're not going to dose any insulin. We're going to stop and take a break. Does your system have similar built in? I think that was doing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have to. We can't just dose off CGM. That's crazy. So we have both upper end when it goes high. So if it's like rising crazy high, then we have our own rate of change filter within our system to not deliver on kind of those kind of extraordinary rises that you might see. And then, kind of on, I'm really kind of proud of this one, but, when you go low and then you like have hypo treatment, and then you might skyrocket up because you had some juice. You don't want to be delivering on that either, right? So there is definitely safety constraints within that really deal with that variability of CGM that is sort of kind of supra physiological. So yes, we have spent all our waking hours thinking about all of those things before coming up with Omnipod 5.
I'll throw this to either one of you for a final question. Quiet. All right, then I'll ask. When do you anticipate we might see iPhone? And when do you anticipate the market will be easily getting the product as they want to, as you roll out? When will that critical point hit that you're supplying the demand?
Well, I really can't say when for iOS or iPhone, but we are working on it. And, I am lucky enough to get to test prototypes. So, that's super fun, but we haven't announced that as yet. But I know that it's something that a lot of our users really want. So definitely is high on the priority list. And then when can our users get it? Was that your next question?
Uh-huh.
Again, we haven't provided timing for that. And that's because we really want everyone to have a really good experience. And we want to make sure that, like I said, everything is working, products working well as expected, but also the wraparound services are also working as expected as well. And, it's going to be as soon as we can, but I can't provide any more information than that. But, getting clearance is a really, really, really fantastic milestone for us and the diabetes community.
We're thrilled, and you just know I had to ask that because that's what we do. We're hashtag we're not waiting, and now it's hashtag we're still not waiting. So we will still be here saying more, tighter targets, clearance for people over 70, all the things that you have to do as you develop the product.
Over 70, yeah, it is cleared.
Oh, yay. See?
6 and over. Yeah. That was, just my 6 and over is cleared.
We have we have so many more great questions too that will not fit in this visit. And I'm wondering, is there a way to get some of those answered some other time later?
I'll send them along to you.
Yeah,
And
that'd be great.
yeah.
I'd
And-
love to read all the questions. I'm sorry we can't get through all of them today, but I think these are questions that our team needs to be prepared for. So all of this is really great practice for our team as well. So I really appreciate the feedback from the community. And honestly, it really is, I personally feel deep gratitude for the diabetes community that has sort of adopted me and, given me a really fantastic career, and that is just so incredibly meaningful. So it's opportunities like this just come, once in a lifetime. So
we
really
appreciate what we did, and we hope the FDA doesn't ruin your Christmas next year, because I know that was a really tough Christmas for you. We are grateful. Don't take our impatience as lack of gratitude. We just want more, because we live with it and it's our lives. But thank you everyone for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your time, Trang. I can't imagine how tired you are, and your voice held up and you did great. Lisa and Hudson, thank you for sharing. That was fabulous. And we'll be back in touch, because we will.
We're excited for everybody, for the people that can't or don't loop too. Wow. Yeah.
Really excellent. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening, and really know we appreciate all that you do.